Hello, Positive Philter listeners. As Philip Wilkerson, this was a great conversation with my friend Daylen Orlick about his journey so far through his master's program, as well as his current journey getting his EDD at George Washington University in D.C. So check this out if you're an aspiring higher ed professional or someone that's looking to go back to school. This is great, full of helpful information, and just a great conversation. Welcome to Positive Philter with your host, Philip Wilkerson, a podcast that focuses on friends, family, health, and career, with a little self-help along the way. Please join me in this journey for self-improvement, and I hope what I have to share will make you a better person, thus making the world a better place. I hope you enjoy the show. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, people. It's Philip Wilkerson back with another episode of Positive Philter. I'm joined by a special guest. Everyone's a special guest because they take time to join me on the show. I'm joined by Daylen Orlick. And, you know, this is a colleague of mine at George Mason, but in addition to the many things that he's doing, he is going back to school. And so I think I'm going to call this Back to School. I think I just came up with that episode right now, the title. But before we get in this episode, tell the listeners a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Phil. It's great to be here. So like you said, my name is Daylen Orlick, and I'm the Associate Director of Family Programs here at George Mason University. And prior to coming here, I've worked at several different institutions like Towson University, Hofstra University, and Long Island University in a variety of different roles and capacities, and did my undergrad and graduate degrees at Hofstra University, which is on Long Island in New York. So shout out, go Pride. But now I'm currently pursuing my doctoral degree in higher education administration at the George Washington University, and just completed my first year.
If I had a clap track, I would have done it. So yeah, take us a little bit. You know, we're gonna go through your background, your life, and then we'll get into the current going back to school as a working professional. But were you from the area? Are you from Long Island, New York, or all that? How'd you end up at Hofstra?
Yeah, so I'm not from Long Island at all. I grew up in Reading, Pennsylvania, which is about maybe like 30 minutes outside of Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is more so known for breaking Amish and John and Kate plus 8 than it is.
Yeah.
They grew up down the road, and the Reading Railroad on the Monopoly board, that is all us.
I literally was about to say that. I was like, man, I know my mind goes crazy places, but okay, so you're in PA.
Yeah, and my dad grew up on Long Island in Belmore, New York, and told me about Hofstra and took me on a campus tour. You know, those free college applications go a long way of enticing folks to apply, and applied, got in, and stepped foot on campus and just kind of fell in love with the campus community. It was 15-20 minutes from the beach on Long Island, and 15-20 minutes from the city, so kind of got a lot of phenomenal experiences, and yeah, just kind of fell in love and stayed in New York for about 8 or 9 years and
afterwards.
then moved down here. Yeah.
Was a lot of people from PA at Hofstra? Because, like, funny thing is I went to JMU, and it feels like JMU was, if you're not from in-state, it was a lot of people from Jersey and Pennsylvania that goes to different colleges, right? So I feel like Jersey and Pennsylvania go everywhere for college. Is that the same thing?
Yeah, I would definitely say there was a lot of people from Pennsylvania, from PA, New Jersey, and then a lot of New York, Long Island individuals was a majority of the population, I'd say. But I feel as though a lot of folks from the Pennsylvania, New Jersey area, there's a lot of good schools in those states, or you don't want to go to that state school that's there. I didn't necessarily want to go to Penn State, so I was like, I'm going to go to Manhattan. I'm going to go live right outside of the city.
Yeah, and so kind of doing the condensed version. I talked about this with Joe, my man. Joe, about the higher ed professional. I don't think anyone goes, you know what, I'm going to college, and what my dream is to work in higher ed. So take us through that journey of undergrad at Hofstra and grad at how did you get into this world and profession?
Yeah, so I originally went to Hofstra to be a music major, and had done music business and was really into performing, and I was in New York City. I would go in and do, open mic nights, and prior to going to school, I would go to New York City and perform all the time, and was like, oh, music is going to be my career path. And then after taking two years of music history, I decided, you know what, maybe music is not my career path, and decided to go the business route. But while I was going through all of my degrees and trying to figure out, what do I want to do, I was getting really, really involved in the university. So I was an orientation leader, I was a tour guide, I was kind of like the step up from orientation leader, where I was supervising the team of orientation leaders, called a head orientation leader. And then I was like, oh, I need to do this business internship for marketing. I'll just do my marketing internship in the orientation office. So I just kept working and working, and then was involved in, a fraternity, and I was involved and I was the president of a a cappella group and involved in another a cappella group. I was doing the most at all times, which comes to probably no surprise to you, knowing what you and I are both a part of here at Mason. And then I was like, oh, it was my junior summer, and I had a summer intern. We hire summer interns here at Mason also, and we had hired a summer intern for Hofstra, and I was like, what are you studying in grad school? I was still trying to figure out what I want to do, and they were like, oh, well, I'm studying higher education. And I said, what do you mean you're studying higher education? And they said, oh, well, you know that your boss works at the university, right? I said, yeah. And they were like, that's literally what I'm studying to do, is how to do that full time.
How to be a full-time.
And it just clicked, and so I went right into grad school for higher education leadership and policy studies, and continued to stay really involved, and then just kind of fell in love with the field. I've been in the field now just under 5 years. So
dang, you're still a baby.
Yeah.
5 years. But still, the fact is that there's two things that came out that I was thinking about, and going to tangent while I was listening, is that your music and your performance as a strength really aligned with being an orientation leader, right? Like personality, being outgoing.
Oh yeah.
You're technically performing every time and saying it's the best college in the world. Like, you're putting on a performance. Did you feel like that?
Yeah, I mean, I felt as though me being in front of people all the time anyway for performing or singing came naturally to when I then had to lead a group of 20 or 30 individuals, right? It was very much that Hofstra also had a very unique orientation experience where we were doing skits and sketches and having to be on stage and performing in front of people for 8 weeks straight, and it kind of felt, like it was always that. It was always that high energy.
Like he was a cruise performer.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
8 weeks straight. Yeah, like he was doing.
Oh, we'll be here all week type vibe. Yeah, and so when we were doing those things, it very much felt that I could take the love and passion of performing and being in front of people, and I'm a very extroverted individual, and take those strengths and wanting to be around people and get my energy from people, but utilize it in something that was at first started as a passion and just really, really enjoyed doing, that I then turned into being a career, which was really great.
So in the moment of grad school, right, like you said, okay, I found out that my boss has a higher ed degree. What was some of your experiences in grad school where you're like, okay, maybe higher ed is, you learn about the system of the university, right? And you could be in any part. You could be in like conduct. You can be here. Where did you kind of like find was it because you were already bringing people into university orientation things? Was that like, okay, I'm going to when I studied this graduate degree, I'm kind of be in that lane of welcoming people to the university? Or like, did you figure your niche of higher ed? Because it's so wide. You can do so many different things.
Yeah, I think, when I first started, I was a graduate assistant in the Office of Student Leadership and Engagement, where I did all their leadership development initiatives and programs and all of their evening and weekend programming at the university. So I was working with a lot of clubs and organizations. I was doing kind of more personalized, tailored leadership development experiences for juniors and seniors, and really trying to figure out what I liked and what I didn't like. I had obviously had a lot of experiences as an undergraduate student that I was kind of like, oh, maybe I'll go into fraternity and sorority life, maybe I'll go into student involvement, maybe I'll do orientation. And then when I got my first job at Long Island University, originally as a student success coach, and then was promoted to being the manager of student engagement and Greek life, they had a very interesting model there that I had not really studied in higher ed was they essentially took their division of student affairs and put it into an office. And so I was an academic advisor. I was a career coach.
Oh, wow.
I did their student involvement and activities. I oversaw all of their fraternity sorority life.
They
And
they
lumped it all together. And so in that experience, I was like, okay, now I'm getting all of these experiences. I've kind of learned what I like, what I am maybe really, really good at. Maybe I want to step away from this. I don't necessarily want to serve on call for housing anymore.
Yeah.
So what does that look like? And then I was able to kind of get back to, okay, I really like fraternity sorority life. I'm going to apply to fraternity sorority life jobs. Or I really, really like orientation. And that's kind of how I ended up here, was working in our new student and family programs office, where I get to do orientation, but then still kind of this learner in me of, well, I want to work with a population I've never really had an opportunity to work with, right? And so that's kind of how the families lens came in. And so I have the opportunity to work within orientation and welcoming new students and our Patriot leaders and our orientation leaders, but then also work with a community of families, which has been really, really cool working with them.
As entry, is it because they were all lumped together? Is it a smaller university where they could lump everything together? And like this university, we're really large. We're R1 institution, so it's too large, probably scalability to do that.
Yeah, it was a mid-size private. They had two universities. So they had one on Long Island, they had their Post campus, and then they had their Brooklyn campus, and I worked at their Brooklyn campus, which was a little smaller of an institution in comparison to the whole university, right, was 15,000 students. But then when you look at specifically Brooklyn, it was maybe closer to the 5,000 level. So it was a little bit more manageable. It was a caseload of like 250 rather than 550, 600 students that I was working with. And so it allowed us some flexibility to be, okay, I'm going to serve as an advisor, but then, at 1 o'clock I have this program I'm going to put on for students, and then I'll come back and continue to do our coursework and whatever else with you.
So what, now that you found your niche, and that was it, you just spoke about it earlier, you were applying to fraternity, sorority life, and orientation. What was attractive about George Mason? And then when you got here, what was some of your first instincts like? Because you're bouncing, I'm pretty sure the vibe from Long Island and Hofstra is quite different in Northern Virginia.
Yeah, very, very different in just regional specific things. It was definitely an adjustment. I think what made Mason so attractive to me was it was a public institution. I had only ever really worked at private institutions other than my brief stint at Towson, where I was, an orientation supervisor. I worked as a summer intern in their orientation office, and I was like, I want an experience working within a large school. I also wanted to get out of New York. I'd only really ever experienced colleges and universities within the Northeast, and so it was I wanted a new experience in a new area to kind of just broaden my horizons a little bit, broaden my network a little bit, right? We have the privilege of being able to go to conferences and do those things and meet people, but really being able to get to know folks in this region rather than only knowing people from Long Island was really, really appealing and attractive. And then just the size of Mason and the opportunity to go back to my roots within higher ed, why I got into the field to begin with within orientation was really attractive. But some of that shock was, I have 6,000 students at this entire university, and we have 6,000 students just living on campus. And there was a lot of, I was in one city block within downtown Brooklyn, and now we have, a 400-acre campus. And I'm like, that's definitely different. And so it was definitely a shift, but it's been really, really great being able to have an experience of welcoming, 5,000, 6,000 students every summer and 2,500 families every summer and working with them through their entirety of being at the institution. And so it was really, really a shift for sure.
When did you get here again?
I got here January of 2021.
Oh, you got here during the pandemic?
Yeah.
I feel like I've known you longer than that in my mind. I guess that's how nice you are. So, man, you came here during the pandemic. And talk about that then, because I didn't realize. I thought you were earlier than that. I don't know why I thought you were.
Yeah.
I thought you were here I got here in 17. I feel like you got here 17 too. I don't know.
Yeah. It definitely sometimes feels like I've been here a lot longer. Just how many people I know, how much I've been involved in, and so it definitely feels a lot longer maybe.
That was what I was surprised.
Even in my head, sometimes I'm like, that's right. I've only been here just over 2 years.
Okay, wow.
So, Yeah, it was. I came here January 2021, not peak COVID, just kind of after, but I was in Brooklyn peak COVID and kind of experiencing all that while trying to be a really active member in the university. So of course that also played into, wanting to get out of New York a little bit. Being stuck in a 500 square foot apartment was a little, is challenging during that time. And so coming here, I started working fully remote in January of 2021. We were still working virtually, but planning in-person experiences for Explore Mason and stuff like that, because we were kind of making our way back to being in person for orientation-esque.
I remember summer 21, fall 21 was more.
We were starting to kind of get back. We were starting to
circles on the floor.
Exactly, we were starting to plan in-person family weekend. I'm like, what buildings are you even referring to? I've never even stepped foot on campus yet. Which was also a wild experience, interviewing and never seeing the school and never really meeting people in person and being expected to, reach out to these people. I don't know what offices these even are. And, hey, we're planning the brunch to be in Dewberry Hall. What is Dewberry Hall? And then I'm finding out it's a room within the basement of the Johnson Center and not its own building. And, so the experience was just really, really interesting, trying to build relationships, build rapport with stakeholders, campus partners and people within my own office, and also trying to learn all the buildings and do everything that is expected of a professional within orientation and within our office, right? Our office touches so many different parts of the institution, and so it was really challenging. It was interesting,
It sounds challenging. I mean, I feel like you probably just need to come on campus during COVID and just walk around.
See
where the buildings are and stuff.
I stepped foot to pick up my computer. My supervisor at the time had met me there. I was like, oh, it's so great to meet you in person. And then she's like, I'll see you in about 3 months when we actually get back on the campus and start doing that. So it's like April-ish I started really stepping foot on campus. So between January and April, I'd never really come to campus or experienced being within the university. And then fall, really being able to see students come back in full swing and really being able to see people like you in person for the first time.
I feel like I was like that's why I felt like I knew you longer, but was it that time we did the show? The little I feel like the first time we met was when we did the talent show.
Yeah, we did the Mason's Got Talent for Family Weekend.
When was that?
And that was October of 2021.
See, okay, now it's tracking.
Yeah.
And I thought you was the way you were talking to everybody and knew everybody, I thought you were long. See, that's what you were acclimating yourself to people.
I was just trying to get in. When I stepped foot on the campus, I joined pretty much every committee and everything is possible, because it's like I need to know who these people are and who I'm going to be working with and make friends and really try to find my community here at Mason within Northern Virginia, and so I just joined it all.
all the UL committees. Yeah, I thought about it. So dialing back, we're gonna go into the actual episode. I feel like we're having a great. So let's say giving advice. You're a hired professional and you got a new job at a new university. Going back to what you did, what would be some tips that you would share with yourself or someone else to say, this is a way to really build campus partnerships if you're new to a university? Because I feel like you did it very effectively.
Yeah.
Honestly, you did it very effectively to the point where I did not know that you started during a pandemic. So what were some strategies you would incorporate someone to do?
Yeah, I would say, a lot of institutions, especially an institution like Mason, have a lot of opportunities for you to get involved, right? So there's a lot of committees and subcommittees within those committees that you can be a part of. I think joining maybe 2 or 3 of those at the start is probably a good idea. I may have just jumped right on in and I said, what's 10 extra meetings a week? And, and didn't think through maybe some of the long term of being so involved and engaged within the community. I've always been one to do that, though. So, college and grad school, I did the same thing, and it's just kind of been my way of life with stuff. But I would probably say if you're either a new professional or a continuing professional that's maybe going to a new institution, talk to your supervisor or talk to people that you are starting to meet of what are you involved in? What are ways that I can continue my growth and development outside of the things that I'm learning in this office, right? So I joined some supervision opportunities and went through a training called Radical Chats here and started learning how to be an effective supervisor and starting to do that so I could better supervise a grad student and, really tried to start joining those things because then the more and more people that I got, connected with, the more that they were bringing me into the fold of other things also, right? So I felt the same way even when we were, and this would be if we have undergraduate students listening or graduate students listening, making a friend or joining one organization could then lead you to joining 5 different organizations because you became friends with this person and that person was affiliated with this, and it turns out that you both are really interested in that. So then they brought you to a club or organization meeting, and it just kind of is this trickle effect of involvement and engagement. And so I think when it came to joining here, I was like, okay, I'm going to join this and I'm going to go to this training and I want to do this. And then from there it was like, oh, I met you and you were a part of this, or I met Amy Snyder and she was a part of the symposium, so I joined the symposium committee, and now I'm a part of like 3 different subcommittees for that symposium committee, so really trying to figure that out, but really putting leverage on some of the friendships and relationships you build through the job of like, hey, you said you were involved in this podcast and I would love to be a guest on this podcast, and that's how I'm sitting here today. So I think there's building that.
Yeah, strategically. Like I said, we were now that I think about it, like we were on like 2 together, maybe 1. The UL like awards one, like we're on that. And so like finding ways to do it, and it fills you up too, because like I like awards and recognition. Yeah. So like I think maybe my way to add to that is do 2 or 3, but make sure the 2 or 3 are aligned with your interests, because it's extra work.
Yes,
for sure. Always not getting paid.
And I think
make sure you're interested in the extra thing that you're doing. The extra committee is professional development. Well, I like learning about professional development or some mentorship. Like don't do one like or maybe if you want to get better at skills, like I want to learn finance, so I'm gonna join some like finance committee to learn something I'm not normally doing. Maybe that, but you have to have a balance, right?
Yeah, always a balance. I think that's something I'm still working on, and I think you bring up a really, really good point of areas of interest and passion, but also understanding like you can have 30 different passions, but that doesn't necessarily mean you could need to be a part of 30 different committees to be able to pursue that. And it takes up time, it takes up meetings, it takes up being on site for programs or initiatives. And so make sure you're finding this balance of I'm able to find an interest or be a part of this one committee, but that committee takes up maybe 5 hours in my week, rather than I'm a part of 5 different committees and they each take up 5 hours in my week. Sometimes you have to kind of find that balance, because your work still needs to get done while you're also pursuing some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that's a perfect segue, because you are pursuing this, but now you are going back to school to be the good doctor. So take us through that journey. When did this bug get in your ear? I think it's a twofold question. Like, do you have parents or that have doctors or aunts and uncles? Like, are you I guess we say first gen, but are you the first gen doc student? Maybe that might be a different
I think
subset of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the bug has kind of always been in my ear. When I decided that I wanted to pursue higher education as my career path, I set the goal for myself. It's a lofty one, but I want to eventually hopefully become a university president. And so what that means is you need a doctorate. And so that was kind of like always at the back of my mind of when, right? And so it was never of a should I pursue this or will I pursue this? It was always like, when is the right time for me to actually pursue this and find the time and energy to be able to pursue it. And so it was kind of always lingering. It's like, okay, I'm going to get some work experience, full-time experience, take a step back from school after grad school for a bit. But I always knew eventually I was going to want to pursue a doctoral degree. When it comes to my folks, my dad has an associate's degree in culinary arts, and my mom has a bachelor's in journalism, but no one had ever gotten a master's degree. Okay. No one had ever thought about pursuing a doctoral degree. And so in that sphere, it was always me kind of like excelling or trying to figure that out on my own. Yeah. In a sense, my parents have zero idea necessarily what working in higher education even is. And so, and I think a lot of folks are, oh, what do you teach? And I'm like, I don't, I'm not a faculty member.
What you do at that university?
Yeah. And so, I think there's always that. But But then on my partner's side, she has a family of folks with doctorates and educators, and you know, her mom works in higher education, and her grandmother was the dean of a nursing school, and you know, and I'm like, okay, so like she gets it. She's in higher ed with me here at Mason. She works in the Carter School, and so it's been great having such an incredible supportive partner, being able to then motivate me to like go back and get my doctoral degree and being with me on that journey. So that's kind of how it's started. Was okay, you know, her and I are getting married this year, so it was like, okay, in our timeline of like what we look at life at, like this is the time to do it, or it'll be post kids maybe, or post whatever, and so, you know, and so thinking through what does that look like, and so it was kind of
you're a planner,
a very long-term thinker type person of like, okay, like it's going to be now. I'll finish this hopefully within 3 or 4 years, and then we can really start thinking about the rest of
that makes sense. And that makes a lot of sense. And I think two things I heard there too is one, that you reverse engineered. I love it. I smiled, and that wasn't a smile of like, this dude crazy or not. It's more like, wow, that was a really lofty goal, university president. But then you use that lofty goal of university president to reverse engineer and say, okay, what do they all have in common? Mm-hmm. And most university presidents are Dr. So-and-so.
Yep.
So you're like, okay, going way back from that lofty goal, I need to say what would be a stepping stone in that trajectory. So I think 100%. That's a great thing to do. Did you do any informational interviews with people? Like you like to say, you have the mother or future mother-in-law that has the deanship. Did you like ask people about what program to get into, or like why was that a value add? Did you start asking questions?
Yeah. I spoke with my partner's grandmother, and she is a doctorate, and she was like, this is kind of what my journey to being a faculty member was. This was what my journey was to being, really, really involved in the nursing school, and like how she kind of found her way. She had transferred multiple times within her doctoral journey also. So I was like, okay, like interesting. What does that all look like? You can
actually transfer.
Yeah, I was like, I didn't know what that would actually look like. I thought I was just stuck with the one program that I decided to do. She's like, no, I started here, and then I went here, and I didn't like that. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to go. And she went to Columbia for her doc program, and was like, okay, I'm going to get my degree from Teachers College. I was like, okay, cool. Like, I'm glad to know that I could do that. And then when I was going through, GW's higher education administration page, on their notable alumni was Dr. Sally Lawrenson, who's our assistant vice president of university life here. And so I was like, oh, great, I'm going to set up a coffee and go get lunch with her, hear about what her experience has been, and really kind of gain some knowledge of like, okay, like what can you tell me about this faculty member? Like, what was your experience with them? Like, okay, this program meets once a month on Friday and Saturdays. Like, how did you manage that coursework? Did you real intentional conversation around, okay, what can I expect when I'm going through this process and this experience? And she was really able to lay it out of like, okay, this is how I would recommend you do this. Typically people do about 2 classes a semester. If you're meeting once a month, maybe every single weekend you take a Saturday morning and work on your readings and your writing and whatever else, and then you kind of have some wiggle room during the week to really pursue your work. And I'm like, okay, good. Like, you're
asking real questions.
Yeah, and so her and I probably spent 2 hours sipping on one coffee each, and just trying to really talk out what that experience was going to look like. So I think when it came to that, really trying to be intentional of who I was talking to, really trying to gather information. And now I talk to both of them on a really frequent basis of like, okay, this is what I'm thinking for my dissertation. How would you recommend I pursue this? Or, I'm thinking this is my research method of like, oh, I want to do a quantitative or a qualitative study. And they're like, okay, based off of your questions that you're asking, I would probably recommend this. So I've really been able to build significant rapport and relationships with them, not just because of my working relationship or personal relationship
with these
people, but it's really like a mentorship of kind of navigating
their lived experience has been helpful. Yeah, that's crazy. First of all, I'm smiling like, man, you're like a career counselor, because one of the things I thought about was like, I tell this all the time, is like the best people to talk to about a program is not the actual like university. And I'll say this, as I say this to an orientation person, they're like, because they're going to be like, this is the greatest place since sliced bread. We love this university. You're like, all right, let me get the real. So let me talk to an alum that went through it. And I do that all the time where I'm like, okay, I mean, I still talk to both about how to get in and admissions requirements, and also it's still good to know all those things. But one of the things I found very valuable about quote unquote networking is just basically asking people that have lived that experience ahead of you, and just asking those real questions like, where do I park? All those like things like you can just say like this, or who's the cool professor I need to sign up, or like what? And I found that because I did like a year of information before I got into my doctoral program. I did the same thing, like who was already in the program that I could just ask questions. Like, so there's a gentleman, or they, them, non-binary, Xavier Clark, like Hall of Fame, name in the rafters, doctoral student. So I just asked questions to Xavier, like, what did you do, this, and so just knowing a student was really helpful.
Yeah, and I think that also comes to like even looking at the programs you want to pursue, right? Like, it's even not just asking questions to the alumni of those programs and doing that information searching, but also asking questions about yourself, right? Like, what capacity do I have? What do I need to be successful? What do I need to look at in order to ensure that I actually reach the finish line, right? Because I think sometimes it's like, oh, this program sounds great. They have all these classes. They have these great faculty. That's all great. That's all really, really important. But also, for me, it was I work in orientation. And so over the summer, my entire summers are occupied. There is no reprieve. There is no real lull within that because I'm working, 14 sessions, really, really long days. And then during fall is family weekend and spring is preparation work for this. So really understanding myself and what capacity I had, the bandwidth of, okay, this program only meets once a month. On a Friday all day, a Saturday all day, and really knowing, okay, on Saturdays and Sundays, or maybe on a Friday evening, I could do some coursework, I can do my readings, I can do that, and I can space it out through the month, whereas I didn't know if I necessarily had the bandwidth to be working during family weekend time and still going to 2 classes a week, 3 classes a week, and really trying to ask yourself questions of like, what do I actually have the bandwidth for if I want to do this right now in this moment?
And was that also the delineating factions between a PhD and an EDD? It was because of the different ways. I think curriculum is different. You're still a doctor. You get either way, but like, isn't one more research based and the other one's more practical based, and they might have a little bit more flexibility in regards to what you can do and not do?
Yes and no. I think GW's programs for their EDD is just as intensive as their PhD programs.
They have both?
They have both. So they have a PhD in like educational leadership, but I wanted a higher education administration focus.
Gotcha.
So that was also things that I had to ask myself, right? Like, what type of program am I looking for? Do I want to do educational leadership and then focus in on a concentration, or do I want something that maybe is a little bit more broad stretching, right? Like, oh, I want to do higher ed admin. That could be a dean of a college, or that could be a vice president of student affairs maybe, or, really kind of having this experiential opportunity to kind of understand a little bit, still figuring out what niche I want to go into, whereas a PhD maybe might focus solely on, okay, you're going to do this. You're researching this topic. You are really honed in on this area, whereas maybe within an EDD you get to experience maybe all the facets, understand every focus area. And I'm not saying, this is not me
selling either one.
This is not me saying one over the other is good or bad. They're both significant. At the end of the day, you get to call yourself a doctor. It's great. And not all EDDs are structured this way, and not all PhDs are structured this way, right? So, but in a lot of the research and knowledge that I gathered, it was like, okay, do you want to really focus in on this, or do you want to really understand and maybe have some expansion? But the program at GW is it kind of feels like one while also getting the experience of the other, right? Like, I do a lot of my research, I do a lot of that stuff when it comes to what I'm planning on researching and understanding all of that, while also being able to maybe look at an elective or understand the greater elements of being an administrator within higher education.
I mean, at the end of the day, like I say, you can go, it's program and curriculum is whatever, it's your experiences, the networks you're building, and then you're getting a benefit and value add for yourself. So Definitely. Like, I think you're talking about customization. Like, these are things that you learn from undergrad on, is not just look at the blanket thing of a school, look at the individual program, ask questions, know what you're getting into.
For
it
sure.
just doesn't translate. It just gets different as you have real life bills added to it or something.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's also the thing is like figuring out just you just got to figure out it all. It's overwhelming. It's an overwhelming process to go through of where do I want to end up? Where do I want to be for this? Do I want to do it online or in person? Like what matters most to you, I think, is going to kind of set you up for success, because then you feel a little bit more bought into the experience that you're about to get or go through, because a doctoral program's hard. It is hard. And so, really understanding the foundational things will help make it not so hard. You know what you're getting yourself into. You know what you're about to experience. You've talked to people about what their experiences have been and are maybe currently, and so I think it's really, really important for folks, if you're planning on it or maybe you're in it right now, is kind of understanding what all that looks like.
So what are some of your shows and growth? So shows as in things you're proud of, I want to show off within your first year, and some of the growths, like this is the area I want to have to grow is hard or a challenge.
Yeah, I think the shows would be I did it.
Yeah, they're a fact.
I think, and you're a doctoral student also, and I think the show is I got through year one, right? Okay. I got through year one. People don't really ask for GPAs, but I did it with a 4.0 thus far. I'm waiting on grades for spring, but I did
finished,
right.
Yeah.
I think second show is I've learned how to do it. I think there's a difference between just going ahead and doing it and learning the tools and the strengths and the traits that you need to be able to be successful while doing it. I've learned what I need to do when it comes to my reading. I've learned what I need to do when it comes to writing and formatting and doing what I need to do. And so I think those are the big shows. I think grows is growing maybe more so in confidence for myself of like, I can continue to do this. I don't need to put so much pressure on myself to memorize every last line of every single article. Or, some months you're reading 8 chapters for a book and 30 articles that all related to that same book, and you're like, how am I supposed to even contextualize what everything is saying and do that? So really understanding like, it is okay if I don't remember the author of one of the 30 articles I had to read, right? And so like I think the grow for me is growing and just like understanding of like it's okay, and growing in confidence of like, but you can still read all of it, you can still do all of it, and having confidence.
Do you feel like, I don't know, maybe I learned this, I'm like the professional slacker, so I was the opposite, like read the beginning, the middle, whatever. But like, do you feel like that came from trying to prove that you need to be there? Like, because like you realize in classroom discussions, like either you read or didn't read, that you can share or not share. And so like no one's really checking and say, oh, you read every single article. Yeah. It's more so like us taking it on ourselves, and you want to contribute to class discussions. Yeah. So you want to be like in the middle. So read enough so you can participate. Yeah. So like you don't need to know they're not going to ask you like, oh really, was that really on page 10? Like,
I think some of it's self-inflicted, right? Of having to figure out like, oh, do I need to do this? I think, as someone who went through a graduate program that was very discussion based and more like, what has your experience been in this work, and then how does that pertain to maybe what you read, rather than like, okay, what's this theory? And you're like, I have not learned this theory before, or whatever. And I guess it depends on your program. I'm speaking solely from my experiences to this point. But, I think some of it has been very internalized pressure. I think because I'm the first person in my household to also go and get a doctorate, I think there's also a lot of, I want to make them proud, not just like myself, right? Of like, I'm not just doing this for me, I'm doing this for my future. Yeah, like I'm doing this for my family, right? I'm doing this for my future family, of like my future kids, of like, I want to be able to get a career that does this and like be able to provide this. And so I think there's a lot of internalized pressure to be like, oh, I have to know every little detail about this article, maybe not coming from the program, but like more internalized to me, to show you that I did this and like prove to you that I've accomplished these things. And sometimes that can be very, very overwhelming and daunting, especially, maybe if you're a first generation college student, that undergraduate experience might already feel like that. And if you're thinking of doing a doctoral program, sometimes it's even more elaborate or more accentuated of what that looks like, because I heard the statistic in class the other day of, after we finished class, it was you all are pursuing a doctorate and less than 2% of the population has a doctoral degree. Mm-hmm. And so when you contextualize it of like, oh my gosh, this is so much bigger, there's not a lot of people that actually do that. Sometimes that also feels very pressurized of like, I am accomplishing something that is so much bigger in the grand scheme of things. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it adds stress, but sometimes that adds relief of like, I am pursuing this, and not everyone goes out and says, you know what, I'm going to go get a doctorate.
That's just half and half. And I could think about it, you're right, like the internalized pressure, and also just looking at the room. What's the makeup like when you look at the rooms that you're in? Like, I realized that in my program we mix a lot with the master's student, mm-hmm. but like I'm on the older end a lot of the class. Like, I'm not even 40 yet, and I'm like on the older end. I've seen a lot of, especially in the cohort of just the doctoral students, a lot of going straight through the pipeline, and they're still 25 years old or something like that. So I'm like, oh, okay. So that makes me, honestly, on that end, when I see the younger people, I feel like I'll be chilling, because like, I'm like, I got life, and they're like so pressurized about grades. I'm like, as long as I pass, I got kids. I
have enough on my plate. The fact that I was even able to get this assignment in is an accomplishment.
That's my mindset too. It's like, so I feel like the pressure cooker of where I'm at, my pressure cooker is different, because like, one, I'm older than a lot of the students, and two, like, I think just my life and what's going on in my life, like this is not the biggest stressor going on. So.
It's interesting that you say that, because I feel like I am the youngest in my program.
Okay.
And so a lot of these folks have a lot more lived experience than I have in the sphere of working and in the sphere of life, and so here I am trying to contribute or try to be this, and I have people who work in the provost's office coming in who have 30 years of experience and already have a law degree, and I'm like, okay, listen, just because I've been in the field 4 years does not mean I'm inexperienced when it comes to these things, but I understand, and so I try to utilize that more of an opportunity to listen of like, what have they learned as they are doing this, but then it also makes me feel really accomplished and really proud of myself of like, I am in the room with them, and I am pursuing this, or maybe I'm teaching them some things that they are learning, or whatever else. And so I think sometimes being a young professional, but also maybe young within the sphere of being a doctoral student, I feel like a lot of people, it's kind of one or the other, where it's like, I have a lot of experience and I've been in the field 10, 15 years already, and now I'm going back because I'm ready for the next step, or I'm doing this now because I want to eventually get to the next step, and I never will have to do this again. Because once you're doctor, and I don't need to go get 3 or 4 of these. I think it's kind of this give and take of what that looks like, but it always contributes to great conversation and a lot of learning on both ends, I think. So
it's very interesting. It's program by program and reading this room by room. And cohort by cohort, for sure. But like, just reading that, I think, having the different dynamics, I guess, does change your internalization of it. Like, me being the oldest one, I'm like, I don't know, I just sometimes I come with like life advice. I'm like, oh, and I was like, dang, I feel mad old right now talking to these, and they're young, and so I think it might be different. I could see that experience, because it was kind of like when I was in my master's program, that was the opposite feeling, where like I was always trying to prove myself, because everyone was like from the world of counseling, and I was like, I'm a history major, so it depends on their room and the makeup. But I think at the end of the day, it's like, I like that part where like, I'm here, so I obviously earned to get here, I deserve to be here. So this is a long discussion. I did not know we was going to go on this. This is probably a really good episode. So let's go right into it, shot for shot. You get to ask me any random question. I get to ask you a random question. You want to go first? I'll go first.
Well, obviously we're talking about doctoral programs. What were your grows and shows for your experience thus far, while you've been going through your stuff and your journey in all of this?
Well, I'm actually going to cut. I'm not over yet, so I still got things to do. So I got paper due. So I'm still doing. So I can't use. I made it through year 1 yet. So I still have year 1 to go. But I think the fact that the same thing is that I am competent. Like, kind of the opposite. Like, I came from a family of like everyone is a doctor, lawyer, bust. So when I told them I worked in education, it was already assumed like that I'm gonna go further. I don't know, it's just like my family is like, okay, like what's next? Or like I have aunts and uncles that are college professors. So it was always like this pressure cooker, right? So like the fact that I'm doing this for me is good. And in a weird sense that I'm keeping up with my family's quote unquote legacy. Yeah. Like a grandfather was a doctor, so I'm like, wow, a medical doctor. So I'm like, all right, this is kind of a standard that if I want to, be the James, you got to kind of like step up, which on the flip side, it does have a lot of pressure, like doing that. So I think my shows is that I'm doing it. I got in. The fact that I got in, and I like it. Like the actual fact that I like socially, I like everyone that I've actually interacted with the program.
Yeah.
Class, faculty, that was probably the biggest thing that if I can go back in a time machine and really put emphasis on, is that it's really important to be in a program where you actually enjoy the people, because it's a hard process.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're going to go through something hard, you might as well enjoy the people that you have to do it with.
Yeah.
I'm the one that started the group chat and the group meets and corralling the people together. And I really can say that, like, with full authenticity, that, like, I really just like the people that I'm doing this with. Like, they're all nice. They're nice, just the fact that flat out nice people. So that's one of my shows. Grows is straight up time management, like life. I'm doing way too much. I got 2 kids, I got a family, got a wife, got real bills, and so I still need to set up those systems to continue. That's still a struggle. And I'm not going to take classes over the summer. I'm doing one at a time. I'm the long haul. Like you say, you're trying to get it out in 3 years because you're young. I'm just like, I'm trying to get it done, but also at a pace where I can still be a family man. So that's my growth. My growth is I need to tighten it up. Like time management is trash bags, but the fact that I can, it's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the fact that you can, I think everyone should have a show, whereas the fact is that I actually made it or completed something, regardless if it's pretty or not, that is an actual victory.
Yeah, for sure.
Straight up. All right, so my question for you, so you said you're in musicals and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Do you what is your favorite form of entertainment? Like, what I mean by that, do you like musicals to watch and listen to? Do you like movies? You're from that performing world.
Yeah.
You like music, concerts.
Yeah.
What is your entertainment thing?
Yeah, I think concerts are my go-to.
Okay.
I love listening to just live music. It could be any artist. It doesn't matter to me.
Okay.
I could go to a rinky-dink bar in the middle of nowhere and like listen to live music and be super, super content with just having music in the background while I'm eating, or maybe watching an artist who is just happy. I've been on both sides, right? Like the person who's in the artist, but then the person who's up on stage who's happy that one person is sitting in the audience. And I would love being that one person that's sitting there and listening and really engaging. And then I think when it comes to I think for form of entertainment, live music. It doesn't matter.
What part of the live music do you like the most? The vocals? Is that something you pay closer attention to? Or you like live music, like real full bands?
Yeah, I like just the musicality of it. It doesn't have to be a full band. It doesn't have to be... It could be one person with an acoustic guitar just singing. I think for me, it really just comes down to this connection piece of really hearing depth when it comes to their experience and what they're singing about, right? I remember being the 15-year-old up on stage singing about what I thought love was, and then I've also been in the crowd listening to a 40-year-old man singing about what love has been. Yeah. And so, I think...
audience connection.
All of its connection, all of its just the musicality, maybe the instrumentation. When it's a full band, how does that sound together, right? Like, it doesn't just sound like 6 different instruments. Like, what does that look like? And so I think it's just the beauty of people's experiences and stuff that they're willing to put out there, and the vulnerability sometimes that it shows, right? Sometimes, I've sang songs that I've written and cried in front of the crowd, and I'm like, listen, y'all, it's just one of those songs for me, and I really appreciate you for letting me be safe, feel safe in this, of sharing that with you, and I hope you feel some sort of connection to that also. And so there's just some beauty about feeling
Music
vulnerable
connection.
and just that musical connection, right? I feel the same way about food, of like I can share food with people and understand them as people and have good, deep conversation with them. But I think when it comes to music, it's also the same thing.
Music is a connector. It's a vibe, like I said. It is. I do now think about it. Live music is. I mean, I like listening to music, but I think more so like the reason I like live music is people watching and seeing other people's experience. Like some people dancing, some people chilling.
Yeah.
You know, just scoping the scene, and that's something you get out of live music. All right, well, this has been a great episode. This is a full episode, actually.
Yeah.
So now we're at the part of the show called Shout-Outs and Plugs. So show love to anyone you want to show love to, anyone. And then plugs. These are ways that either things you're working on or ways that you're comfortable with the audience connecting with you and the like. So shout-outs and plugs.
Yeah. Few shout-outs. Shout out to my office, my new student and family programs team. They are just so incredible and have been so supportive on my journey through my doctoral program, with allowing me to, be off on a Friday to go pursue my classwork, and a lot of folks in that office being like, you need to go home because you have an exam this week, whatever it is. I tend to be very, very focused on work, so really allowing me that separation has been really great. Shout out to my partner and my family and really everyone who's been just so supportive along this journey. It's not just you kind of pursuing this degree. I think it's a lot of the times the people who are behind you in your corner helping you along the way in that journey. So folks like I mentioned, like Sally and my soon-to-be grandmother-in-law, I guess. I don't think this journey would be as smooth without folks like them in this. And then what was the other? The
plugs. Things you're working on, ways they can connect with you.
Yeah, plugs is feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. Find me there. It's just Daylen Orlick. Feel free to connect with me on Instagram. If you like a food account or want to know where to eat, it's a burger at Daylen. So feel free to find me there. But whatever it is, just know that I'm here to answer whatever questions or help support anyone who's looking to do this or is currently in the journey and is looking for somebody to do it alongside. For anyone listening, Phil and I do that. We check in on one another. We've talked about doing schoolwork together and really holding each other accountable in this journey. So if you're a part of a journey right now and want people to do that with, feel free to reach out. Happy to hop on a Zoom call and just have a working buddy. It doesn't necessarily have to be to even chat.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Daylen. This has been great. Thank you, and please, I'll put all the information in the show notes. Thank you, Positive Filter listeners, for listening to this episode. As you know, every episode is dedicated to the memory of my late father-in-law, Jeff Kirsch, where I will put in the show notes the Jeff Kirsch Anti-Hunger Fund, supports the work that he did for fighting food insecurity with FRAC. And then just, follow the podcast, Positive Filter, on all the things. Like, subscribe, review, etc. And just keep on supporting us. And thank you so much. And we're out. Thank you for listening to Positive Filter, a podcast that focuses on family, friends, career, with a little self-help along the way. If you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your family and friends. And like the Facebook page, Spreading Positivity Movement. Thanks for listening.